The cold of the marble floor seeped through the thin soles of her shoes, a familiar chill that had become the silent punctuation to her nights. Elena moved with a practiced quiet, her cart a ghost accompanying her through the cavernous lobby of Sterling Industries. The building was a monument to modern ambition, all glass and steel and soaring lines, a cathedral of commerce that humbled the sprawling city below. But at 3 in the morning, it was just a vast, sleeping beast, and she was one of its keepers, a silent guardian of its polished surfaces and empty spaces. She worked with a focused grace, her movements economical and serene. There was a rhythm to it, a meditation in the circular motion of her cloth on the brass fixtures, in the steady swish of the mop across the floor. She saw things others missed, the faint scuff mark left by a hurried executive's shoe, the almost invisible smudge of a child's hand on the glass doors, the way the moonlight pooled like liquid silver near the grand staircase. These were the secret stories of the building, and she was their silent reader. She paused at the great brass nameplate on the wall, its polished surface reflecting a soft, blurred shape of her form against the sharp, incised letters, Jonathan Sterling, CEO. To him, and to the hundreds who bustled through these halls by day, she was invisible, a necessary function, like the humming of the air conditioners or the silent sweep of the security cameras. A pair of hands, a worn blue uniform, a presence that registered only when something was out of place. She was the quiet hum beneath the roar of ambition. Tonight, the silence was broken. Headlights sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the sleek, black door of a luxury sedan opened with a muted thud. Jonathan Sterling stepped out, his silhouette sharp and imposing against the city's glow. His face, illuminated by the lobby's cold light, was etched with the fatigue of a deal gone wrong. He strode into the lobby, his expensive leather shoes echoing a sharp, impatient rhythm on the polished floor, a sound that seemed to chip away at the stillness. He was talking into his phone, his voice a low, serrated edge. It's not about the money, it's about the principle. They knew the terms. Make them understand. He stopped, pinching the bridge of his nose, his back to Elena. She instinctively pulled her cart back into the deep shadows of a large potted ficus, hoping to melt into the background. But he turned, his gaze sweeping the lobby, and his eyes, cold and dismissive, snagged on her. It wasn't a look of recognition, but of pure annoyance, as if she were a piece of furniture left carelessly in his path, a flaw in his perfect, polished world. He didn't say a word to her. He simply adjusted his path, walking around her as if she were an inanimate obstacle, and continued toward the private elevator, his phone call resuming its angry hum. The burnished steel doors slid shut, sealing him in his world of power and fury, and he was gone. Elena stood there for a long moment, the scent of his expensive cologne, a mix of sandalwood and something sharp like ozone, lingering in the air. She felt the familiar sting of being unseen, a feeling she had learned to swallow like a bitter pill. But tonight, it felt different, sharper. Then she did something she had never done before. She walked out from the shadows, over to the brass plate she had just polished, and placed her palm flat against it. The metal was cool and solid beneath her hand. She closed her eyes, not in anger, but in a strange, quiet communion with the name, with the empire it represented. Her lips moved, but no sound came out, a silent promise to a life no one in this building could imagine. She then returned to her cart, the squeak of its wheels the only sound in the vast, empty space, a quiet defiance against the crushing weight of indifference. The next morning, the city awoke to a sky the color of bruised plums. A fine, persistent drizzle slicked the streets, blurring the world into a watercolor of gray. Elena stood at a bus stop, her daughter Luna's small hand tucked firmly in hers. Luna, all of 7 years old, was a miniature sunbeam against the bleak morning, her bright yellow raincoat a splash of defiant joy. She was chattering about a dream she'd had, one involving a talking squirrel and a spaceship made of cookies. Elena listened, her heart a warm, sheltered place against the city's cold shoulder. This was her real world, this small, fierce love. The world of Sterling Industries was just a stage, a role she played for survival. Here, holding her daughter's hand, she was not invisible. She was a universe. A cookie spaceship sounds like the best kind. Elena said, her smile genuine. Did it have chocolate chip windows? Luna giggled, a sound like tiny bells. The bus arrived with a hydraulic hiss, crowded and steamy. As they found a seat, Elena's gaze drifted to the Sterling Tower, its peak lost in the low-hanging clouds. She thought of the man in the lobby, his face a mask of power and frustration. She wondered what he dreamed of. Did men like that dream of anything other than numbers and contracts? Or did their dreams get polished away, like scuffs on a marble floor? Jonathan Sterling, at that very moment, was staring at a set of architectural blueprints, his mind a labyrinth of stress. The deal from the night before had indeed collapsed, and the fallout was a cascade of frantic emails and impending board meetings. His office, on the 50th floor, was a cage of glass and chrome, offering a king's view of a kingdom he felt was slipping through his fingers. He saw the city not as a collection of lives, but as a grid of assets and liabilities. His secretary, a sharp woman named Beatrice, entered with a tray of coffee. The preliminary reports on the system failure are on your desk, Mr. Sterling. It seems to be a cascade error in the core programming. The engineers are stumped. Jonathan waved a dismissive hand, his eyes not leaving the blueprints. Then find engineers who aren't. I pay for solutions, not excuses. His tone was clipped, final. He was a man who believed every problem had a pressure point, a weakness to be exploited. He had built his empire on this belief, but it had left him isolated, surrounded by people who feared him, not respected him. Downstairs, in the building's sublevel, Elena was cleaning the employee locker room. It was a place of quiet confessions, a forgotten photograph taped to a locker door, a worn-out pair of running shoes, the faint scent of someone's chosen soap. She found a small, leather-bound book of poetry left on a bench. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the gold-embossed title. She opened it to a random page and read a line. The heart is a landscape that learns its own geography. A memory surfaced, unbidden, sharp and clear. A sunlit university library, the scent of old paper and rain-soaked coats. A professor, with kind eyes and a tweed jacket, leaning over her drafting table. You have a gift, Elena, he'd said, his voice warm with encouragement. You don't just see buildings. You see the structure beneath the surface, the poetry and the math. You see how spaces can hold people, how they can shape lives. She had been a different person then, a girl with blueprints of her own, not for buildings of steel, but for a life of intellectual creation. A life before it had all been swept away by a sudden storm of loss and responsibility that had forced her to choose survival over her dreams. She placed the book back on the bench, a ghost of a smile on her lips. The poetry was still there, she thought. It was just written in a different language now, in the rhythm of her work, in the silent care she put into erasing the day's chaos, in the fierce, protective love she had for Luna. Later that week, a small crisis erupted, a technological tremor in the heart of the building. A water pipe burst in the server room, a critical hub of the building's operations. Alarms blared, red lights flashing with a frantic, synthetic pulse. Engineers in hard hats ran past Elena, their faces grim. She was instructed to stay clear, but from her vantage point down the hall, she could see the schematic on a technician's tablet. Her eyes, trained to see patterns and systems, scanned the complex web of pipes and circuits. And she saw the mistake. A rookie error. A bypass valve that had been installed backward, creating a pressure feedback loop that was threatening to fry the entire system. She watched them struggle for nearly an hour, their voices growing more frantic, echoing in the sterile corridor. They were focused on the symptoms, not the cause, trying to patch leaks instead of stopping the source. Elena felt a strange pull, a muscle memory from her past life. She knew the solution. It was simple, elegant. A single turn of a single valve. But who would listen to a janitor? To them, she was part of the scenery, not part of the solution. She took a deep breath, the air thick with the smell of ozone and anxiety. She walked over to the youngest-looking engineer, a man with panic in his eyes and sweat on his brow. She didn't point or accuse. She just spoke softly, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Have you checked the pressure regulator on the secondary bypass? Sometimes they are installed in reverse during maintenance." The engineer stared at her, first in disbelief, then with a flicker of condescending annoyance. Ma'am, with all due respect, this is a complex, multi-million-dollar system. We have it under control. Elena simply nodded and walked away, the sting of his dismissal sharp but expected. She didn't push. She had offered the key. It was up to them to see the door. She returned to her cart and began mopping a floor on the other side of the building. The rhythmic slide of the mop a calming mantra, a way to center herself. 20 minutes later, the alarms fell silent. The young engineer, his face flushed with a mixture of relief and embarrassment, found her. He didn't apologize, not really. But he couldn't meet her eyes. You were right, he mumbled before. Hurrying away, his pride clearly wounded. The incident was a ripple in the corporate pond, quickly smoothed over. But someone had noticed. Jonathan Sterling, reviewing the incident report, saw a brief, perplexing addendum from the head of engineering. Issue identified following an unorthodox suggestion from a member of the night shift custodial staff. Custodial staff? Jonathan frowned. It was an anomaly, a piece that didn't fit in his ordered world. He was a man who hated anomalies. He pulled up the security footage from the server room corridor on his desktop. He watched the scene unfold, the chaos, the panic, and then the quiet woman from the lobby, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the frenzy around her. He watched her speak to the young engineer with a quiet authority. He watched her walk away, without a second glance, without any need for validation. There was no arrogance in her posture. No, I told you so. There was only a quiet certainty. It was the same woman. He zoomed in on her face. There was an intelligence in her eyes, a deep, settled calm that he had completely missed, had completely dismissed. It bothered him. It was like finding a priceless artifact in a forgotten corner of his own house. Who was she? His curiosity piqued. He asked Beatrice to pull the personnel file for the night shift janitorial team. He found her name, Elena Morales. The file was thin, almost non-existent. A start date, a social security number, a contact address in a low-income part of the city. No previous employment listed. No educational background. It was a ghost's resume, a life deliberately erased. But Jonathan was a man who knew how to dig. He made a call to his head of security, a former detective with a knack for finding hidden things. I want to know everything about her, Jonathan said, his voice low and intense. Elena Morales. Be discreet. I want to know where she came from. A few days later, Elena was cleaning the executive washroom, a space of opulent marble and gold fixtures, when she found a small, gold cufflink by the sink. It was intricate, a tiny, stylized S. Sterling's. She picked it up, its weight surprisingly heavy in her palm. For a moment, she considered leaving it for him to find, a small, anonymous act. But then she thought of Luna and the lessons. She tried to teach her about honesty and doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. She wrapped it in a clean tissue and took it to Beatrice's desk. I found this, she said simply, placing it on the polished wood. Beatrice looked up, her expression one of mild surprise that quickly morphed into something else. Oh, Mr. Sterling has been looking for that. He was quite upset. She paused. Thank you, Elena. She used her name. It was the first time. She offered a clipped, professional smile, but as Elena turned to leave, Beatrice's eyes lingered on her, a flicker of newfound respect in her gaze. That evening, as Elena and Luna were at the bus stop, the drizzle returning, a black car, the same one from the other night, pulled up to the curb. The back window glided down. Jonathan Sterling was sitting inside, his face unreadable in the dim light. He wasn't looking at Elena. He was looking at Luna, who was tracing patterns on the fogged-up glass of the bus shelter, her breath creating little clouds. Is that your daughter? He asked. His voice was different now, softer, stripped of its corporate armor. Elena's protective instincts flared. She pulled Luna a little closer. Yes. He held her gaze for a long moment. He seemed to be searching for something, a connection between the woman on the security footage, the woman who returned his lost cufflink, and the mother standing before him in the rain. She's beautiful, he said, and it sounded like a genuine admission, not a platitude. Then his phone buzzed, a summons from his world, and the mask of the CEO snapped back into place. The window glided up, and the car pulled away, leaving Elena standing in a cloud of exhaust and confusion. The encounter was unsettling. The worlds she had kept so carefully separate were beginning to bleed into one another. The next day, the report from his security head landed on Jonathan's desk. It was a thick file, not a thin one. He opened it, and the story of Elena Morales unfolded, page by page. It was a story of brilliance and tragedy. A full scholarship to MIT, a dual degree in structural engineering and architecture, graduating summa cum laude. A rising star at a prestigious firm in Chicago. Lead architect on the award-winning Helios Bridge project, a structure he himself had studied and admired for its innovative design and graceful lines. He saw pictures of her from that time. Confident, smiling, standing beside civic leaders, her eyes bright with promise. And then, the pivot. Her husband, a firefighter, killed in the line of duty. The subsequent collapse of her world. The crushing weight of medical bills for her aging parents. After a serious illness, the move back to this city to be closer to family, taking any job she could find to keep her small world, her daughter, afloat. She had buried her past, not out of shame, but out of necessity. She had traded blueprints and accolades for a mop, and anonymity, all for the love of her child. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning under his weight. He felt a profound sense of dislocation, of vertigo. The woman he had dismissed as part of the furniture had designed structures he admired, had lived a life of intellectual rigor he respected. He had looked at her, but he had not seen her. The realization was a cold, sharp shock. It wasn't just about her, it was about him. About the world he had built, a world so insulated by wealth and status that he had become blind to the humanity right in front of him. He felt a deep, unfamiliar sense of shame. That evening, there was a major event at Sterling Industries, a gala celebrating the company's 25th anniversary. The lobby, usually Elena's silent kingdom, was transformed into a glittering spectacle of champagne flutes, designer gowns, and the murmur of powerful people. She and the other night staff were tasked with coat check, a frantic, behind-the-scenes operation in a small, cramped room. From her post, she could see the city's elite mingling. She saw Jonathan Sterling, a perfect host, moving through the crowd with an easy, practiced charm. But she noticed something different tonight. His eyes kept scanning the room, as if searching for someone. And when his gaze passed over her small station, it lingered for a moment, and she saw a flicker of something she couldn't name. Suddenly, a small commotion erupted near the grand staircase. A child, the young son of a wealthy investor, had slipped away from his parents and was climbing on the outside of the ornate railing of the second-floor balcony, dangerously high above the unforgiving marble floor. A collective gasp went through the crowd, a wave of horror that silenced the music. Security guards started moving, but they were on the other side of the room, too far away. The boy's mother screamed, a raw, piercing sound of terror. Before anyone could react, Elena moved. She didn't run, she flowed. There was no panic in her, only purpose. She handed her stack of coats to a stunned coworker and was at the base of the stairs in an instant. She didn't shout at the boy, which would have startled him, likely causing him to lose his grip. She pitched her voice low and calm, the same voice she used for Luna's nightmares, a voice that was an anchor in a sea of panic. "Well, hello. There," she said, her voice cutting through the terrified silence. "That's a wonderful climbing frame. You're very brave. But I know an even better one." The boy, teetering on the edge, his small hands white on the brass railing, looked down at her, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "It's a secret," Elena continued, her voice a conspiratorial whisper that created a bubble of calm just for the two of them. "It's made of stars and moonbeams. But you have to come down from there to see it. It's a special secret, just for you." She didn't move closer. She just held out her hand, her palm open and steady. It was an invitation, not a command. The boy hesitated, his little body trembling. Then, slowly, carefully, he began to climb back over the railing to safety. He reached the landing and ran down the stairs, straight into Elena's arms. She held him for a moment, her hand stroking his back, murmuring soft words of comfort, before leading him to his sobbing, grateful mother. The entire lobby had fallen silent. Everyone was staring at her. The janitor in the simple blue uniform who had just averted a tragedy with nothing but her words and her composure. Jonathan Sterling stood frozen, watching the scene. He saw not a janitor, but a woman of immense grace and strength. He saw the architect, the problem solver, the mother. He saw the poetry in her soul that he had been too blind to read. The gala continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. The polite chatter was now interspersed with whispers about the coat check. Woman, Elena, trying to retreat back into her anonymity, found it impossible. People looked at her differently now. They met her eyes. They smiled, with genuine warmth. She was no longer invisible. Jonathan approached her after the crowd had thinned, when the lobby was beginning to empty. He stood before her, not as a CEO to a janitor, but as a man stripped of his pretenses. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, humbling clarity. Your file, he began, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. I read your file. Elena's heart tightened. She looked down at her hands, at the worn, calloused skin. I see, she said, her voice barely audible, bracing for pity or dismissal. No, he said, shaking his head. You don't. I didn't. Until tonight. He paused, searching for the right words, words that felt inadequate. The Helios Bridge. I've studied it. It's a masterpiece of design. The way it balances tension and compression, it's perfect. Elena looked up, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of the woman from the photographs, the brilliant architect. A sad, knowing light in her eyes. It was a long time ago, she said. It shouldn't have been, he replied, his voice filled with a conviction that startled them both. Talent like that, it doesn't just disappear. It gets buried. And my company, we are experts at building things. We should be building people up, not letting them hide in the shadows. He looked around the grand, empty lobby, at the marble floors she kept so pristine. This place, it's just glass and steel. It's the people inside that give it a soul. People like you. He took a step closer. I have a proposal. Not an apology, because words are not enough. A proposal. We're launching a new urban development division. A new vision for the city. One that's about community, sustainability, poetry. I need someone to lead it. Someone who understands structure, but also understands people. Someone who sees what others don't. He held her gaze, his own eyes filled with a sincerity she could not doubt. I'm not offering you a job, Elena. I'm asking you to come back to the world you were meant to be in. To build again. Elena was silent for a long time, the weight of his words settling over her. It was more than a job offer. It was a key to a door she thought had been locked and rusted shut forever. She thought of Luna, of the future she could give her. She thought of the blueprints in her heart, the ones she had folded away and hidden for so long. She looked at this man, this powerful CEO who had, in the span of a few days, seen past her uniform and into her very soul. He had been humbled, not by failure, but by revelation. And in that, she saw a glimmer of hope. On one condition, she said, her voice finding its strength, clear and steady. Anything. The division will have a nonprofit arm, an endowment, a percentage of. Its profits will fund scholarships for women and single parents in STEM, people who have had to put their dreams on hold. A slow smile spread across Jonathan's face. It was the first genuine smile she had ever seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. Of course, he said. Of course it will. It's a brilliant idea. A few months later, Elena stood not in a janitor's uniform, but in a tailored suit, presenting a new project to the Sterling Industries board. Her voice was calm, confident, as she walked them through a design for a new community center, one that integrated green space, affordable housing, and public art. It was a design born not just of technical skill, but of deep empathy. It was a structure with a soul. The board, initially skeptical, was captivated not just by the design, but by the quiet passion with which she spoke. Jonathan Sterling sat at the head of the table, not as her boss, but as her biggest champion. He watched her, and he saw the future of his company, a future that was richer and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. He saw a legacy that was about more than just profit margins. It was about building a better world. Later that year, Elena stood on a stage at a university auditorium. It was the first awards ceremony for the new foundation she had created. She watched as a young woman, a single mother who had been working 2 jobs while taking night classes, walked up to accept the first full scholarship. The woman's eyes were filled with tears of gratitude, and in that moment, Elena saw her own journey reflected back at her. She saw the cycle of struggle being broken, replaced by a cycle of opportunity. That evening, Elena didn't take the bus. The black car, now a familiar and welcome sight, was waiting for her. Luna was in the back, buckled into a car seat, chattering away to Jonathan about her day at her new school, showing him a drawing she had made. Elena slid in beside her, her heart full. The relationship between the three of them had blossomed into something unexpected and beautiful, a quiet, supportive family built on mutual respect and a shared sense of healing. That as they drove through the city, the lights blurring into streaks of gold and silver, Elena looked at her reflection in the window. She saw the same face, the same eyes. But the woman looking back at her was no longer invisible. She had found her way back to herself, not by reclaiming the past, but by building a new future, one where her strength and her softness could coexist, where her mind and her heart could work as one. She had learned that true power wasn't about being seen, but about seeing the value in oneself, even when the world looked away. The journey home was quiet, filled with the comfortable silence of a family, newly formed, finding its rhythm. And as they pulled up to their new house, with its small garden and bright, welcoming lights, Elena knew she was finally, truly, home. It wasn't just a place of shelter, but a place where every part of her was seen, valued, and loved. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that dignity shines brightest in silence, subscribe to Stories That Breathe, where every story whispers truth.